Welcome, brothers and sisters across the internet to this special emergency geopolitical meditative analysis on the Sabbath of the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom, which is, of course, fundamentally my dream for the fusion, integration of the North American collective, civilizational complex. It is Saturday, circa 5 p.m. EST Montreal Hawk Island time, and I would just want to get a little salutation to the truckers, the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, firefighters, plumbers, electricians, welders, and all our brothers and sisters, of course, workers who flip some burgers now, delivering the food security, which is much needed to all our fellow respective citizens of the North American collective civilization of both Canada and the United States. Because I always think, of course, and I'm a North American Canadian Quebecer, and I always think, of course, in the maximization of liberty, security, prosperity for the North American collective in a binational manner for my brothers and sisters in the USA in the 50 states, and my brothers and sisters across the Confederation of Canada. So the United States is a federative republic, but Canada was mostly founded on confederation, and of course we are still here, although the king is absent. Our prime minister still pledges allegiance to the King of England, as my uncle Connie did a few weeks ago when he took the reins of governmental power in Canada in 2025, ending the reign of the 44th Parliament. So now we're on the 45th. Double check my information, but since geopolitics is my realm, and sometimes I preoccupy myself with these details due to having a neurological mental divergent condition known as Asperger's, and meaning that I have certain characteristics. I'm not going to use the name symptoms, which might seem odd, strange, and bizarre. So I'm going to commence with gratitude, and we're going to rock and roll a little bit in a Dragon versus Storm special dedication and special geopolitical dedication to the firefighters combating wildfires in Canada, and those all across whether flooding, storm relief operation, firefighters, or those, of course, involved in the post-flood relief, because we got struck, both Canada and United States, the whole North American civilizational complex, and Canada and United States both. We got struck both by lots of flooding of water, and floods of fire, including the ongoing dragon fire in the Grand Canyon. Dragon, I believe it's called it's a mega fire. It's Dragon Storm fire. And other wildfires across the collective, and I gotta commence with gratitude. And it is August the 2nd. Paid my rent today, actually. Paid my rent for the month of August. Paid my electricity bill. Already paid it yesterday. Paid my rent today, and paid my phone bill. So now I can rock and roll and do my independent work, as have been done for years and years and years in this room office and temple, which I'm grateful to have. And I'm grateful to have this meal, which I'm gonna enjoy during or maybe after, because it's that Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom Sabbath. My vision, of course, to incorporate, infuse Canada, United States, the 10, the 50, and the 3 for the 63 Imperial Republican super states in our coming super states, and always for the Sabbath to be for the Dancing Goddess and the Dragon Kingdom, and for rejuvenation, rest, and pleasure, and lots of dancing and eating and feasting. And I hope somebody making that good love now with her black, white, and rainbow, want to come love it with me. I rock and roll black, white, and rainbow. You're a man or a woman, we gotta be of age though, 18, and this is the meal after this special edition Geopolitics, and that gives me hope. When I see people hugging and kissing and holding hands, that always gives me some hope, because it's not all about the money, and we know that it's not all about the money, and sometimes we use the money to buy, sell, and fundamentally money, finances, is a unit of exchange. And that's why at this moment in time where we face perilous economic, financial, and geopolitical times, my DRT theory best. So as I say my gratitude again, although financially stressed, because now I paid my rent today, paid my electricity bill, paid my phone bill, and got some food, got some chicken, and got some club soda because it was on special. So I gotta salute the truckers, the bakers, the butchers, the warehouse workers, the those grocery store clerks and all the North American Collective Workers Party. Let's get that rolling as a third fused party of both the left and the right in a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrism, which I'm going to discuss in the coming minutes and in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. As of course, I am an independent geopolitical theorist, analyst, and thinker and strategist, and also an artist, a philosopher, and a mystic who is androgynous, pansexual, and part of the LGBTQ community as well. And I've been in the open for many, many years myself, but that's just a component which for now we're not going to discuss over much, or although I sing rock and roll for my fellow Rainbow Nation across the empire, of course, 24/7, as I sing that rock and roll for the butchers, the bakers, the nurses, the doctors, the truckers, the plumbers, the electricians. And this is a cup of coffee. I got some milk in it, got some sugar. It is special cold vanilla coffee, so I'm grateful for that. I'm almost running out of coffee, and I'm watching the prices of coffee increase. Came out very good. Very good. It's a geopolitical emergency where we are today. The complex geopolitical arena is becoming more tense every day, every week, every month, and I'm just going to focus on our North American Collective mostly, although I will go in the exterior of the North American Collective because, I'm a North American, Quebecer, Canadian, and I have that Canada tatted up. Don't ask me when I had done this tattoo because my memory is black out, got retrograde amnesia, and I have trouble remembering my life prior to July. Not July, really, the exact month, but between February and July 2014. So spring, summer 2014, before spring 2014. That's a long time ago, almost more than 11 years. And anyways, regardless of whatever the case may be, I moved here in I thought it was 2016, but it ends up that it was 2015, and I've written tens of thousands of pages of philosophy, mainly related to the world of geopolitics, as also rock and roll and sports and fitness. Of course, that's my holy trinity of special interest. And if you know what Asperger's is we Aspies have special interest, also known as obsessive interest. So those interests preoccupy all our daily routines and habits are usually modulated with intensity, super focused, and concentration. Whenever we're involved in those special interests, that is what we are involved in mostly, those special interests which preoccupy most of our daily activities, and it's kind of ritualized like routines which we endeavor for years and years and years. As you can see in my videos, it's sports and fitness, marching, dancing, and doing workout with my marches, long marches, usually to my second home, Mount Royal and back, or around Hawk Island, Montreal, and here in Quebec, Canada, La Belle Province, Montreal, or round about, of course, the island of Montreal, marching, working out, training, exercising. And I always encourage people to work out, train, exercise. I have been myself on a fitness journey ever since 2017, when I moved here. I really moved here with nothing. I don't know exactly what I had when I had here. I came here in this room of San Temple here, not Montreal, but really I don't even think I have much of what I had prior to moving here, which was July 2015. I thought it was 2016, but anyways, rock and roll. And the most important thing is, of course, now, the present time, and how we can advance for a future. And of course, sometimes we all deserve second, third, even fourth chances, depending on what the situation might be to unfold it. And of course, the current geopolitical situation where we are, of course, at a point of critical contention point where we must, of course, muster certain elements of the civilizational conflicts. And of course, I'm going to make the statement, which is important for you to keep in mind throughout the duration of this geopolitical analysis and theorizing, which sometimes might appear to be cratocratic, a bit academic, intellectual, and rightly sophisticated in the propositions that I might be making in the dynamics and the interaction of myself with whoever is going to watch this video, and calling on a meditative state and other subjects. If it's not geopolitics, we're going to touch maybe a little bit, because geopolitics includes lots of other sub categories and sub subjects within the great geopolitical sphere. Geopolitics, of course, is whether you define it in several ways as the study, the interaction of political events, actions, concomitant and co-equivalent with the events which are transpiring on a daily basis and eventual basis on a long term. Of course, decades or even centuries or even millennia, depending on, of course, certain civilizations claim, or certainly right, it dated so that their civilizations date back thousands of years. But here, us in North America, we are a new emergent civilizational complex, and that is one of my, of course, original philosophical propositions and beliefs. And as I'm a North American, Canadian, Quebecer, and the North American complex, of course, situates, of course, that it is in the world history, it is a new and emergent civilizational complex which is not totally divorced but is distinct from Western civilization. So that is totally the appellation and the situational realities of what I deem the North American civilizational complex as a new emergent civilizational complex, which is not totally divorced from Western civilization, but it is distinct from Western civilization. So you have to keep and bear that in mind. As you can see, of course, in the back, I have the Quebecer flag, the flag of Quebec, the Canadian flag, and the U.S. flag is there. That's the U.S. flag in the back here. You see part of it. It's on the table, on the new table, and attached to it, they're attached is the Canadian flag. So actually, you can see how I tied them together in knots. Tied the United States flag with the Canadian flag, but it's that's what I did. They're actually tied in together because we're like a family, a big brother, little sister, big sister type of a family, and a constituent of this new civilizational complex of which I'm gonna discuss. Although I'm joyous myself now because I express gratitude, and I'm somebody who I guess suffered, struggled. I've been depressed, been suicidal, and a lot of people are going through that, and myself have been. And I take it since I survived COVID between mid-February 2020 and March 2020. I've been quite joyous on accepting and the daily days which we have, of course, on a take it carpe diem. The expression carpe diem fully embodies my attitude towards life ever since about mid-February 2020 when I died. Right here in this room office in Temple, I always say that I died, and I still am yet to officially change my name because I said that during my death during COVID and my rebirth. I guess I'm going on the fourth one this summer now as I discuss this geopolitical situation, and I have to say that I am alarmed by the imposition of tariffs on Canada by Donald Trump. And I'm gonna go back in time a little bit. Gonna go back to 2018 when the first, of course, the first time, of course, which I've imposed, which the first during the first Trump administration, Trump imposed tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel of 10%. And that's when I really got into politics. Before that time, I was kind of just coming out of my depression. I was depressed and suicidal for several years, and what made me come out of my depression was crossing Canada coast to coast, coast to coast, coast to coast. I crossed Canada coast to coast, and that event made me come out of my depression and suicidalness, and that was something which I had totally, as an event in my personal life, that totally changed my look. I had a big sort of an awakening, a revelation, and in consequence, I also wrote an a philosophy, a call for a mass public-private partnership, of course, to be integrated and to be applied across the North American civilizational complex, of course, to make them, to integrate, to make them a reality. That is my philosophies, which are mostly public-private partnership based. And the document, I have to find out some USB keys. I wrote about 2018, 2017. Circa started about October, November 2017 and continued it in 2018. It's called the Mass Public-Private Partnership Initiative for the Integrative North American Collective Civilizational Complex Wellness via the financing of citizens tourism. So basically, it's to finance tourism across the 63 United States, Canada in reciprocity for Canadians to go in the United States and my brothers and sisters in the USA to come to Canada. A public-private partnership because I think it does great for mental health tourism and to see all the things we have in the United States, in Canada, United States. We got 10 provinces, 3 territories, and 50 states. And of course, even Mexico is part of the North American complex. Mexico is part of North America. And of course, I integrate Mexico in the North American civilizational complex as well. And even the islands, of course, Haiti, Cuba, Dominican Republic, and other countries such as the islands are part of the North American civilizational complex. Some people push it further to Guatemala, Panama, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and the countries which exist until we reach Bolivia and Venezuela in South America. So going back in time again, back in 2018, that's when I first started challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match on the Canadian-US border. And I gotta give a salutation and a thanks to my anonymous friend for having gifted me these beautiful red, my favorite color, red gloves, and I use them quite a lot, and they pierced a bit. They need some sewing there, see, but they're still good to go. And on 4 sides, they got like 4 sides, which needs to be a little bit of soreness, otherwise they're gonna get more damage. So I guess I'm gonna have to be careful if I use them not to damage them too much. But I think for me fighting Donald Trump, they're still a go, and auctioning them for $1 million to give half 50% to my anonymous friend. And my Dragon versus Trump initiative and boxing initiative is of course a geopolitical ongoing discussion from a North American perspective with all my brothers and sisters, both Canadians and my brothers and sisters in the USA. And I would have voted definitely for Biden or Kamala. And of course, Granddaddy Trump, I always say he made a mistake to impose these tariffs on Canada. It was a geopolitical strategic mistake. And there's no way to invite us to join the United States in such a manner by this economic, financial, commercial pressures. I understand certain doctrines and ideologies, such as peace through strength. I support it 50%, halfway, because I understand fully the world of geopolitics, the conflicts, the past resentments, and the growing escalations, because I have predicted this current geopolitical situation back in 2019. I'm going back and forth in time, I guess, a little bit. And I have proof. I have the proof online, and I have several videos which I made. And in October and November 2019, I had predicted that there's going to be an international conflagration, aka World War III, which some even say that it has already started. And the dynamics of where we are now with the World War III is actually ongoing now, and it has started. And if not, it's going to start any minute, any second, any day, any month. But in order for us to save the world, I guess, and ourselves, the North American collective, from Armageddon, or however we want to define. I am a mystic, but I believe in reincarnations, and I don't have all the spiritual truths, all the spiritual questions. I don't have all the answers to all the spiritual questions, I guess. Even I have more questions than answers. I do goddess, and of course it's always God bless our coming empire and goddess kiss. Because you gotta get that goddess bless, goddess kiss, God bless, goddess kiss, Geodds it, and I will to build the forgotten goddess, Geodds, the goddess temple, and all willing, loving to, who will to support the dream, the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom, my dream, which I've discussed for years and years and years, as if you can check my past videos, is fundamentally a call for a mass public-private partnership across the North American collective civilizational complex and across, of course, the interactions of our daily routines and habits, which myself I do have, and in a neurodivergent manner, and always realizing that myself being neurodivergent and a philosopher, a neurodivergent philosopher, I always have to build bridges, small bridges, big bridges, medium-sized bridges, or extra large bridges. I guess I'm taking that parallel comparison, just like you would order certain coffee sizes, small coffee, medium-sized coffee, large or extra large coffee when you go for the buying your coffees. This, I guess you could consider it to be a medium or large. Not extra large though, but I guess it could be considered to be so. So whatever those dynamics are, which one individual aspect might have, or the characteristics as myself, I am part of this tiny fraction of the population with Asperger's of 0.44%. I always, and we always, but myself, I'm an individual citizen sovereign with Asperger's, so I don't directly represent the whole Aspie community. It's always a constant building of bridges within myself and ourselves, the fellow Aspies of the world and of North America, with you, the 99.56% of the neurotypical population, the vast majority, the vast, the 99.56% of the vast majority of the population, which you live as a neurotypical, and we always have to build those bridges. But I'm not going to discuss much about Asperger's today, but it's something that I have learned to live with and accept the past years, about 3.5 years ago, because for years and years and years, several people have told me and I guess quote unquote diagnosed me with Asperger's and said, you have Asperger's and autism, uh, high functioning autism, and I never wanted to accept that label because there still is a lot of work to be done and it's stigma, and still I hear people here it's a disease, or no, I'm not a disease, it's not a disease, it's a neurological mental divergent condition, it's just the brain mutations. We have these mutations at the micro level and we see the world differently, and therefore we social interactions can sometimes be more difficult, and the way we express ourselves, our communication styles and use of language, employment of the use of language can sometimes be a bit too intellectual, academic, or sophisticated use of terminologies, or the terminologies, the words that we might use might be a bit of the more sophisticated academic dictionary based inclinations and characteristics of utilization of this language, which does not usually is not necessary in many circumstances. So that's sometimes which I always have to be aware of and work on the characteristics and on these, not symptoms, characteristics of Asperger's. The problem is that three main problems with Asperger's is high unemployment rate, and it's totally unacceptable. It's 80% of Asperger's are unemployed. That's 4 out of 5. 80%. Keep that in mind. That's 11 times more than you, the 99.56%. And I had many jobs. I really enjoyed working with the elderly and working in steel and working. I like working, and I worked a lot independently, and lots of independent artistic rock and roll mostly, and dance choreography, because dancing is my favorite sport. But and then geopolitics, and I take great pride in my independent geopolitical, analytical, theoretical, and thinking and the development of strategies, geopolitical strategies. I take great pride of that, and I'm not so good at other things, but when it comes to those three things, that's where for many years all my work and concentration and engagement lies, in those specific areas of interest, also known as obsessive interest. And the other problem is high depression and suicidal rates. I was depressed, I was suicidal. I was depressed, I was suicidal, and crossing Canada coast to coast, that really made me had an awakening to the realization how many things to see, to do here. So I established this in August. Next, in 2 weeks, is gonna be exactly 8 years. In 2017, I think we left 15th of August. Me and my anonymous friend. If I make a man, gonna give half, because it wasn't my friend because of the money. Because I never had any. And financially, I'm still stressed now. But I paid my rent for the month of August, and I can rock and roll. I have net. Please reduce the cost, Netflix. Please reduce the cost, Netflix. But I have Netflix, I have YouTube, and I have this work, I have this electricity. And I give some salutation to the Hydro-Quebec workers of the past for building the dams. Because my brothers and sisters, civilization is a privilege. That was my thesis back in 2023, was the privilege of civilization. I put it online, of course, as I am a continuing philosopher, and my philosophy is, of course, one of my thesis as the people's doctor. And I did graduate high school. I have a high school diploma. According to my documents, I have some good reference letters, but I just don't remember high school. I don't remember my life. I have trouble remembering my life prior to spring 2014. So just before moving here, I lived in a moldy, it was lots of mold. And I don't know really if before, maybe I was an alcoholic, maybe I drank my aspiness, maybe I was doing hard drugs or aspiness. I remember I was attacked by surprise a few years ago. I have to go to the Jewish General Hospital to retrieve the archives, and I was bloodied up, and I had a dislocated right shoulder arm, and went to the Jewish General Hospital. The arm was cracked back, and I was put on some meds. I guess I had my Cillian Pirate episode, and I am every man's wife, I guess, and every woman's husband, quote unquote. That's a reference to me being androgynous, pansexual, part of the LGBTQ community. But whatever the case may be, I survived, and I have plenty of scars, and I don't have resentments towards the 99.56% of the neurotypicals, because we have to work together, and I believe working together now, cooperating in these Armageddon-like types, which we gotta save the world from Armageddon together. And sometimes, it's just things we have to work on ourselves. Sometimes those things are psychological and subconscious. We might not know. Maybe my own trauma caused me certain things, or maybe before spring 2014 I was deeply in drugs, deeply in alcohol, and that's why sometimes drinking a few years prolonged alcohol abuse makes you lose memory, or drug abuse makes you lose memory, or trauma makes you lose memory. So whatever it is, and I'm here, and I'm happy, I'm joyous, I'm just financially stressed, and I love to see people working out, training, exercising. And although I'm alarmed, I was even upset yesterday. Last night I was a bit, I guess, angry, moody, and sometimes I am when I think about the geopolitical situations and the fact that I have warned for years and years and years. I have warned of this storm. I guess you could call it even a storm of the century. I guess we could just name it a storm of the century in many ways, right? The geopolitical of our geopolitical century. I guess this is the storm of the century. There might be others because the only passed the first quarter. We're 2025, so the first quarter of the 21st century, right? I guess I could introduce this the storm of the century, the geopolitical storm of this century for us. So, just to finalize on Asperger's, the problem is lack of friends also. So, lack of friends, high depression and suicidal rates, 9 times higher than the neurotypical. And unemployment, 11 times is unacceptable for Aspies to be 80% unemployed. 80%, that's 4 out of 5, eh? 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. 4 out of 5. 80% Aspies. 80% of Aspies are unemployed. Can you imagine that? 11 times higher than. So, those three problems. It's August 2nd, 2025. Just to say that I don't have many friends, but if you will to take one of these options, friends with benefits only. From now on, I don't will to waste nobody's time. Don't waste my time. I'm not gonna waste yours. Friends with benefits only, and or pledge your allegiance, our family, support the dream, which is fundamentally a call. Brother Scorpio, brothers Bill Gates and others. Support the dancing goddess in the dragon kingdom, which is fundamentally a call for a public-private partnership for the North American Collective and my way to fuse Canada and United States best in the current geopolitical realities which we face in a democratic republic and a pro-labor and love universal revolutionary centrism. And you must understand that my universal revolutionary centrism is tied hand in hand with my trinity of theories, the CIT citizen integration theory, the DRT death fusion theory, and the DFT democratic fusion theory. And that trinity of theories to be implemented via the fourth dimension, which is love. You gotta get that rock and rolling for the love. And that's what we have to understand fully and in complementary of our dynamics of where we are today. Dragon vs. Storm Special Edition, and I'm not gonna continue on Asperger's. I'm just gonna finish on sending some gratitude and thanks and appreciation to my anonymous friend who guess I'm might do like Biden and propose again. But who knows? Gotta get a good ring, a $1 billion ring, $1 million ring, or carve my own ring, carve it. But the problem is, like I said, for Aspies, lack of friends, don't need many, and friends with benefits only. And thank you again to my anonymous friend for a book, 2 books on autism, which were given to me, and I have them and I read them. And one book specifically, which was rented 4 times, loaned actually, not rented, but loaned from the library, and I recommend to all. Appreciating Asperger's syndrome. It made me open my eyes of how I can be vulnerable, and not because I don't understand fully certain social dynamics. I can be vulnerable myself. I can have certain vulnerabilities which I'm not totally aware because of how sometimes we are more direct and offensive, and we don't mean to be offensive or direct. That's just basically how sometimes we might respond to certain questions or certain things. We can be not by volition, malicious will or intent. It's just sometimes we're direct and straightforward, and that can cause certain offense without us realizing, and that's why we have to be told, and we have to work on these characteristics such as breaching personal space or repetition of words or echolalia. So that's it on Asperger's for today. But because I gotta say one more thing, thank you for fellow Aspie who sent $25.44 last September, I think September don't remember the date exactly, September, October last year, a donation. I haven't got any other financial donations ever since, but that $25.44, I remember I got a bottle of wine, the most affordable on the market for the Sabbath, and I got a little bit of a sweets, and I bought a chicken, just like I bought a chicken yesterday. So as I encourage all to work out, train, exercise, and call for the mass financing of people to work out, train, exercise, I'm going to say the statement. I'm gonna just focus on geopolitics. The study, the analysis, the interpretation of political, social, cultural events all fall under what the grand universe of geopolitics is. For us Canadians, and again, keep in mind, I go back in time again, that in 2019, and for this I have the proof, you have to keep that in mind, that I predicted, and I have the proof because I have the video. In 2019, in October, November, I predicted an international conflagration that will come, a geopolitical storm, a World War III scenario. And I have the proof, I have it online, it's online on YouTube, the World War III scenario and the discussion thereof, without giving according to much details, because some of my strategies, and I developed geopolitical strategies, are to be discussed only with high-ranking security members of the security apparatus of both Quebec, Canada, United States, because it's always binational. This is my bipolar, not to be confused with the psychological condition, the bipolar geopolitical strategy. It refers to my geopolitical strategy for the North American complex, total the benevolent dominance and dominion, the total benevolent dominance and dominion of the geopolitical world via the fusion of Canada and the United States in a imperial republican complex, and the implementation of my DRT, CIT, and DFT. So that is part of the grand bipolar strategy, which I'm going to discuss, which we need to advance ASAP, and we need to implement ASAP as a mass public-private partnership, where we take also in consideration the need for the mass rehabilitation of our North American, Canada, United States respective populations by according the great financial, economic, commercial interests of the institutions which exist, the private institutions and the public, to work together for the mass rehabilitation of our citizens, and who are now facing dire economic, financial, commercial straits. And I'm going to come discuss the DRT in a few minutes. So having predicted what's happening now back in 2019, I'll go back to revert, I guess, back in time to 2019, and that event of me predicting the current situation. And in consequence, I also created a workout training program system, which is simple, efficient, effective that to do, because it requires no equipment whatsoever. It requires no equipment, and of course, being that it requires no equipment, it is of course simple, effective to do, and requires no equipment. And I myself done more than 372 sessions. So keep in mind that I myself done more than 372 sessions myself, have done, concluded more than 372 sessions myself. More than 372. That's a lot, and I take great pride in that creation, and I have been and will continue to do today on this video. Call for both United States and Canada to incorporate it in the security forces, the police security forces, such as the provincial or the federal police or the FBI, CIA, and of course the military, the security apparatus, and in high schools, and of course for fellow citizens to be financed to do what's officially termed the General War Integrated Total Body Training System. General War Integrated Total Body Training System. It's a long title, but it's simple, effective, and efficient, and I created on certain parameters where we would have to mass finance the population to rehabilitation, and in case of a World War III, how we will have to advance towards fitness. And keep in mind that all my strategies are only strictly for internal North American collective SSD principles for security, service, and defense, ensuring of liberty, and parallel to the rehabilitation of our brothers and sisters who lost their liberty and are incarcerated. What I call the need for the North American criminal integrated, or the Imperial Republican criminal integrated Criminal Rehabilitation Act. The Criminal Rehabilitation Act, the North American Integrate or the Imperial Republican Criminal RAs, CRA, Criminal Rehabilitation Act, especially in order for us to start building those 44 tunnel complexes in case of a thermonuclear war. Start building those 44 mass tunnel structures across North America, inspired by the Cheyenne Mountain Complex. And just today, you see, and yesterday, you seen the news that Donald Trump decided to send two nuclear submarines in response to an aggressive exchange with Medvedev, who serves as deputy chairman in Russia, who was, I guess, she was president for a few years, but it was kind of more a facade, and Putin was kind of the real leader behind. Some say, but of course that's our analysis. And keep in mind that as much as I know the ideologies, the phenomenons, the ideologies, the philosophies, the politics, the geopolitics of Russia, of the Middle East, of China, of Taiwan, and China, of most of the nations of the world, and with a scholarly, intellectual, academic manner, I remain, and I am a Canadian, Quebecer, Canadian, North American, and I was born in the United States 3 times in past lives, post 7076. You just got to read George Patton, Through a Glass Darkly, one of my favorite poems. And once I was born a woman, post 7076, and twice as a man, served in the same United States Armed Forces, 156 years apart. And I was born right here on the island of Montreal as a woman, sometimes as a man. Before the RCMP was known as the RCMP, I served a little bit in the police force, just a bit, in 1904 when I met Louis Cyr, and between 1688 and 1735 I was born a woman, a Quebecoise. But it wasn't a Quebecoise as today, was because it was still the New France back then, so it still was dependent on the colonial French kingdom and I guess empire at that point in time. Reincarnations, mystic reincarnations aside, today's the August 2nd, 2025, and I'm a bit alarmed, a bit upset. At the same time, I am hopeful that we're gonna find some solutions. Find some solutions. We have to find some solutions. I believe I bring to the table a lot of solutions, part of the solutions, not all, but especially my DRT theory. So now I'm going to discuss the. I'm going to discuss. Just want to just put the light out a bit, if you don't mind, and just because kind of just want to discuss more, focus on geopolitics, and just be a bit in the dark. I'm going to put some on the video, and maybe we can just correlate thereof. But I just want to. Yeah, let's see. Maybe correlate with that, of course, the dependency of our geopolitical theorizing as we have, of course, to live with each other here in the North American Collective, and to to understand fully the realities of the situation that we find ourselves, not just globally, but of course globally as well, but specifically as a Quebecer Canadian, how our correlative aspects is between ourselves and others to be conjointed. So the Trump administration, Trump decided to further escalate the tariff. So now I'm just going to focus for the next minutes on the current Canada-United States relations, geopolitical relations, and leave the baggage at the door. That's important. Just we're going to discuss from a geopolitical perspective, from a real geopolitic, nothing to do really with the German school of geopolitics called the real Geopolitik, but in my way, my independent dragon geopolitical analysis. So this following statement, which I'm going to say, you have to say yes. Everybody has to accord it with a yes, 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 yes. So there's no, there's no maybe to this following statement. This is a constant and has been so for the past 75 years, at least since the Second World War, since of course the British Empire started losing its power. Started losing its power. Of course, as the power diminished. Since the power diminished of the British Empire. Of course, the diminishing power of the British Empire is something which has to be understood and fully to be understood that this statement has to be affirmed in the positive. You cannot argue with this statement. You can argue with other things, but not with this statement. This is real geopolitics. This is the reality. So and this is reciprocal for both Canada and the United States. So both from a Canadian perspective vis-a-vis the United States, and the United States vis-a-vis us, towards us. So our main foreign policy primary interest, if we are to place a level of importance of our relations, political, not domestic, so nothing to do with domestic internal policies, but with external foreign affairs policies, the foreign affairs policies, that is, you have to say yes to this statement. So our primary most important foreign policy objective as Quebecers, Canadians, whether on your left, on the right, in the center right, in the center left, or I'm not referring to extremes, extreme right or extreme left, is to have the best, most cordial economic, social, financial relations with each other, and vice versa, of course, with the United States, with us, reciprocally with us, to reciprocally vis-a-vis us. Because for the United States, although my brothers and sisters in the United States, you have a border with Mexico, it accords that it is with Canada nonetheless as a foreign policy principal objective, the primary, most important. If we are to put a level of importance on certain things, you have like chores to do. When it comes to our foreign policy objectives, is to have the best, most cordial, mutually beneficial economic, defense, military, security, sports and culture, social, cultural, financial, defense, security, all levels with the United States. And for the United States is the same, has to be the same vis-a-vis Canada, right? And then you have all the other more than 156 countries of the world. This is unique for us, really. It's rare that you find other places which kind of it is similar. First of all, because of our geography, our common history, and common future. Our geography, we have to the east, we have the Atlantic, to the west, we have the Pacific. Of course, we have the north, we have lots of north. There's lots of north out there, of course. There's a little bit of border which touches with Russia. But nonetheless, it's not to be considered in these matters. Our first policy. So the most important foreign affairs policies that we have to establish and we have to work towards is to have, when it comes to the external domains, political domains, which are not domestic, in internal of Canada and internal United States, have to have the best cordial, most mutually beneficial economic, social, financial, on defense, military relations with the United States, and the United States towards us has to be the same. So you cannot negotiate with this. This is non-negotiable. You cannot say, no, this is a constant. Has been so at least for the past 75 years. It is today and will be so for the coming decades, I guess, until we establish a World Federation, association, or whatever the case may be, in type of like a fifth element level. But that aside, of course, and that concordium aside, it is, of course, to be so on the level which we have to do, which we have to implement it and to do it as much as we can, to focus our foreign policy objectives as the primary most important. That's a constant. I always make the reference, just like the pi symbol, the N, the letter N, which stands for Normandy, normal, neutral, or of course natural. The letter N has two heads, like two faces of the N, two heads. It represents the pi symbol, which is the numerical value about 3.1415, which is always a reference towards the circumference and of the circle, the diameter, the ratio between the, of course, diameter and the circumference of the circle, right? The pi, it's constant. That's not a mathematical variable, it's a constant. So is what I just said in geopolitics a constant, right? From in the 21st century, this never happened, that and United States administration, the Trump administration, discusses such a language, uses such a language to justify tariffs on Canada. As I've read, I had goosebumps. I was alarmed because I was also remembering past lives, being born in the USA, once as a woman, twice as a man, and having served in the United States Armed Forces 156 years apart in two different wars, and somebody who's always integral for the 63, the 10, the 50, and the 3, and then all our allies and armies, primarily foremost whoever wills to ally an army with yours truly. But nonetheless, it remembers that consequentially, of course, the prudence, and I was a bit moody and angry and upset and disappointed, but we have to move towards solution. I believe some of my solutions are best in the coming days, weeks, and months ahead. So one, the language used in, you can read it by yourself in the White House government, the White House of government. The official statement was that the Trump administration and Trump decided to increase tariffs rates from 25 to 35, and although it does not include I just hear on the news somebody crashed into the RCMP headquarters in Montreal. 44-year-old man. Willingly? Terrorism? I don't know if it's terrorism or willingly, or we'll see, I guess. We don't know yet, but today the RCMP is the FBI of Canada, basically, but not to make that comparison, but I am, of course, proposing my propositions and my philosophies and my call for the signing of the new articles of in the Imperial Republic and Perpetual Union is to fuse the FBI and the RCMP, fuse it into the federal police forces, to fuse the FBI and RCMP, and to fuse Canada and the United States, but my way best because the king is absent, and with mass financing of healthcare and mass financing of social housing building and mass financing of rehabilitation of course depends on what criminal charges, but of course if you are have 44 convictions in the past 11 years, then not so fast. But for the North American criminal rehabilitation, and as I sing that rock and roll for the boys and girls in blue with the brothers and sisters and boys and girls in blue, I sing that rock and roll for you, but nobody's perfect. That includes that me and you. As I sing that rock and roll for the boys and girls in blue, I'll also sing for my brothers and sisters who do their criminal rehabilitation. If you do your criminal rehabilitation, you take your second, third, fourth chances, and that's always something which I rock and roll for and I sing for and I commend and I salute, and that's the whole point of, I guess, if you want to have some justice, some justice. And I'm sometimes, I guess, I gotta slap myself a little bit, and if I don't mean to be offensive to my Asperger's or say things directly, and all my scars, all my things, but whatever the case may be, I'm really have to learn more about today. Supposedly somebody crashed in the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is the federal police of Canada, and which is kind of parallel, similar to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So for my American brothers and sisters, imagine just the news would be that somebody would crash, exactly if somebody would have crashed their car in an FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation building. So I guess we'll learn more about that. And my brothers and sisters, if you have some, mental health issues, emotional issues, just it's important to seek help. Just like I don't need a lot of support myself. As with Asperger's, it's just my only stress really now is really economic, financial, commercial. But this month of August, I paid my rent already, paid my electricity bill, got food and food security. Got to salute the farmers, food producers, truckers, and growing food insecurity. And we need to come together, Canada and United States, and we need to. There are tough times. There are bad, evil people who wish our harm and want to harm us. Canadians, United States. I think we have common geopolitical, not just rivals, but also enemies, and not just necessarily rivals, but with rivals sometimes you can reconciliate, and with some sworn, I guess, deadly enemies, maybe not so fast. So sometimes I guess we gotta take the hammer out, and I'm not gonna say that I support peace through strength. I understand it, but it's 50% with yours truly on peace through strength, because there has to be LOV also, love and understanding as well. Because if somebody doesn't love now across the 10, the 50, and the 3, there's no point. Why? It's not all about the billions and the millions and whatever you have there and whatever. In other words, it's not all about the money that we must be guided by, and we know this fundamentally, that we can. And if you're, you know, you have millionaires, billionaires, and nothing wrong with being financially well off, but just try to work on the selfishness and finance. We need to finance people's fitness for their mental well-being, finance tourism, and finance especially recreational activity and the mass embellishment of the public sphere. Mass re-embellishment, the public sphere is something which would probably be good for yours truly to consider to do, because as we sometimes we don't necessarily console verbally, but we will show action by our compassion, our friendship, our as by action rather than just words, just words, which I guess they're on the consequential words. Just sometimes it's facta non verba. Words is sometimes important for us to take action in regards to our philosophies. As when I explain my DRT, it has to be put into practice. When I explain my total mobile defense theory, which I don't discuss too much, the TM, total mobile defense theory, TMDT, total mobile defense theory, TMDT, total mobile defense theory, the TMDT, the total mobile defense theory, TM, total mobile defense theory, the total mobile defense theory, the total mobile defense theory. When is I started developing after 2017, and I call for this fusion, of course, of all of our security police forces of Canada and United States in order to implement the total mobile defense theory, part of the one might call for the public-private partnership Operation Northern Scorpion, for total security, total service, total defense, and the total mobile defense theory, the TMDT. When we add the fifth letter for the acronym, we add the system. That means that it is put into action. It becomes an action. So I cannot discuss it over much. It has to be discussed with high-ranking security members and apparatus of the total security apparatus of Canada, CSIS, Canadian Security Intelligence Service, and of course RCMP, and of course the CSIS and the Canadian Armed Forces, and parallel, of course, the FBI, CIA, and Tulsi Gabbard, and Pam Bondi, and I guess Ted Hegseth, and David McGinty, and etc., 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 etc. So I'm not going to finalize on that. I'm going to go back on the alarming new development and the tariffs of the fact that there's the tariffs which have been imposed. And of course, it is something which we have to be consequentially and prudently alarmed for, to be consequentially and understand fully the consequence of our act of our collective, that is more where we go from here, of our individual and collective action vis-a-vis each other, the United States and Canada. And I had a little bit of goosebumps because I never really heard anything in this alarming towards us Canada, right? Us Canadians. So the language was very harsh, very severe. So the justification for the tariffs, and of course fentanyl might not cross that much in the United States from Canada. However, what is actually true in the dictum is that there has been an increase in domestic production across Canada of fentanyl, and even the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which is the equivalent of the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, the USA, October 24th last year, 2024, they had discovered the most sophisticated super lab in the most sophisticated super lab in its history. And supposedly the amount of fentanyl that was produced, that they seized it all, they captured it, seized it, the RCMP, the equivalent to the FBI, the Federal Police Force of Canada, supposedly the quantity was capable to kill the population of Canada twice over. So if we're at 44 million, that's 88 million. Can you imagine that? And there was hundreds of millions. And check it out, the seizure in BC, British Columbia, I believe it was 24th of October last year. So just last year. And I remember discussing years in the past, about 4 years ago, about during COVID, with somebody who was discussed security matters, and was an elderly, well, not that elderly, but he was just maybe in his 70s. And he told me that he had served on the force in between 1984 and 1989, and or something like that for a few. And then he hasn't. She was an RCMP, and then he changed. He opened his business or something like that in the 90s, so he 96 or something, and he still has whatever he was. And he said that he never seen, and he knows that the things are increasing. We had some friends, and said that the transnational criminal syndicates in the past years have been increasing and taking root in Canada. So these are transnational syndicate, criminal organization, transnational criminal syndicate groups, which might employ, their certain tactics or certain actions for sabotage and harming us, basically harming us Canadians in ways, by not just by the drug distribution, but in other matters. So transnational criminal syndicate groups, the transnational criminal syndicate groups. So these transnational syndicate groups have been increasing in the past decade or so in Canada. And he was alarmed, and he said, I know some of my friends who still are in the RCMP have been warning, he said, since a few years about this growing threat, the transnational criminal groups taking root in Canada. So that was a few years ago. That was during COVID, and I don't know what happened to him. I hope he's well, but it was a few years ago. We had a discussion, and I think I discussed my workout training program, which I was creating, and discussed geopolitics in general. And I think we had a discussion about history in general. I think we discussed mostly history, geopolitics, and the current state of affairs in Canada. So. But anyways, the alarming words indicated that, of course, there's a growing, the words that were, of course, used to describe the current situation vis-a-vis Canada was that the potential harm for the Americans has been increasing. So it's not verbatim per verbatim. I mean, I don't like to change words too much of somebody else, and especially when it comes to the writings, but to just state that what alarmed me most is this specific words, which it was, you can see it yourself on the White House. It said that it constitutes the growing fentanyl crisis and the drug and illegal aliens flowing from Canada into the United States, crossing the northern border into the United States, constitute an extraordinary threat to America. So these words are super important, that an unusual and extraordinary threat to America. Listen again, this is serious. That the continuing crossing of illegal aliens and fentanyl from Canada into the United States constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to America. And that the fentanyl that has crossed in the first quarter of this year supposedly was 3 times over than in comparison to what has crossed last year, and with the potential to kill 16 million Americans. That was the number given there, that supposedly this fiscal year, which ends, I guess, in 2 months, in September, for the United States fiscal year, that supposedly the amount that crossed into the United States could have potentially killed 16 million Americans. 16 million Americans. So you have to keep that in mind. It's serious. It's serious. We have to. And one of the justification was the fact that there was lack of coordination. Was it cooperation or coordination was the word. Not, but it's kind of extensive to both, right? Cooperation, coordination with the United States law enforcement agencies. So that was one of the motives for increasing in tariffs, and it's alarming. The alarm is in the words that Canada constitutes now an unusual, an extraordinary threat to America. I've never heard such language. Of course, we have the war in 1812, but in the 21st century. So it's serious. We have to, as much as I've been challenging Donald Trump to a boxing match, and it's best to do that, and we build a fort together. And my way to fuse with my philosophies, my ideas, my theories, my propositions, the best way to fuse and to integrate the 10, the 50, and the 3 has to be by this mass public-private partnership and this new signing of this new imperial perpetual Republican Union Constitution, especially, let's do it, I guess, September 11th. On Mount Royal or on the mountain on Mount Royal, whenever the case may be. That is something which has to be inclusive, and in the manner which we are proponent to the appellation of the theorizing, from theory into practice and from practice into theory. That is something which we have to be appellational about, to get on the doings, because it requires doing. It requires putting it into action. So, but that gave me goosebumps to read that about Canada, that we, according to the current administration and Trump, as much as we don't like, or personal issues with Trump, and I, to be honest, the only real, paradoxically, the only real thing, one of the major things that I like about Trump and Granddaddy Trump, is not the way to invite us to join the union. I understand that fully, because I was born an American. In past lives, just read George Patton's Through a Glass Darkly. I was born in the United States. George Patton didn't mention that he was my wife in a past incarnation 2,600 years ago, but he was my wife, and sometimes I was a wife, a husband, and today I guess I can be for adults, everybody's wife, everybody's husband, play that androgynous pansexual rock and roll. But nonetheless, the to keep this in mind, the ideation and the ideal, that it's not the way to invite us, but paradoxically, saying that Canada to be the greatest state, you bet. You bet, double trouble. We're the true North, strong and free. Canada tattooed there. But being strong and being free is not enough for me. Have to have some loving and some righteousness, some justice, right? So that's why our Imperial Republican fusion will be for the free, the brave, the strong, the loving, and the just, also the righteous, to do some charity for those who need their second chances, third chances, to rehabilitate, right? For all those more vulnerable, more to rehabilitate, the more vulnerable to rehabilitate, to give them a second, third chances as well. Because that needs to be applauded, lauded, when somebody turns their life around, and whether in a fitness journey, whatever the case may be, psychological, psychosexual. Sometimes I don't have sexual frustrations at the moment. I will have friends with benefits, but yeah, I mean, I've been sexually frustrated, or whatever the case may be. Sometimes we have hidden psychological fears and lusts, and I think it's gonna be 4 years soon in September, October, since last time since I watched pornography. I stopped watching pornography myself, so I celebrate that. But I don't object or morally, ethically, to people who want to watch or producing it. I don't object morally to it. Just for myself, I just stopped watching myself. So that's another point. But if you have certain addiction, because there's pornography addictions, and like I said before, spring 2014, maybe I was addicted to alcohol. Maybe I was a junkie. Maybe I was a junkie. Because sometimes that's what causes memory loss and retrograde amnesia. But what's most important is now, all the scars and the battles, and how we move forward. And I believe moving forward is my special theories and philosophies and implementation thereof of them. So that is something which alarmed me greatly, to hear such words, to read such words, and especially that we constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat. So that's the official continuing use of what's called the International Economic Emergencies Powers Act, which part of the Trump's powers, which is to issue executive orders. So that also has to be understood from a geopolitics perspective. The power to issue executive orders is, of course, mostly employed post the 9/11 world. Of course, the use of executive order and the relation to the justification by a national security measure. Of course, the national security measure. Now, to counterbalance the sometimes we have to discern in certain things and say that this is not that grave of passing of fentanyl into Canada, but there has been an increase of it, and there has been an increase domestically in Canada of fentanyl production of these super labs, because just last year, 24th of October 2024, the RCMP just dismantled and seized lots of fentanyl and precursors, and of course supposedly they employ a method which the Mexican cartels employs, and they're transnational criminal syndicate groups which are part of linked with China's Chinese or triad or their underworld criminal organization known as the Triads of China. So different criminal underworld organizations, different criminal underworld organizations, I guess, are concocted. And of course, this fentanyl is pretty much deadly, poisonous, and I don't know exactly the effect or how it does it, because I mean I don't do drugs and don't do but of course here in Canada cannabis is legal. You have since 2019 we have cannabis is legal, and you have so much cannabis on the market that I guess that's an alternative. And you have so much alcohol, if you want to feel a bit on the more goods, I guess you have to be a bit in a different state of mind, or by alcoholic ingestion if you so will. But again, there's the problem with alcoholism, but in moderation, I guess it's and when it's recreational, because when it becomes an addiction, is no longer recreational for well-being, which once in a while you gonna do that recreation. So myself included, I don't know, before 2014 if I was addicted to alcohol or hard drugs or drugs and alcohol, and maybe I was, maybe I wasn't, and I'm not today. I'm very rarely, actually, I think 3.5 years ago I bought cannabis, legal cannabis, and I still have it. And I guess let's invite whoever wills to. If you will, I can share some of mine, and we can discuss some of my philosophies, theories, and rock and roll for the dancing goddess and the dragon kingdom. So now I'm just going to focus on the solution and vis-a-vis the implementation of the DRT, and I'm going to state the DRT, the debt refusion theory, and discuss my debt refusion theory fully so that it's fully understood as much as it possibly can. So, and before I go into the DRT, I will to state that I will to build together with the construction workers who rock and roll four buildings on the Canadian-US border. Let's build the North American Imperial People's Coliseum to be the biggest ever sports arena complex ever built, to be 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome, bigger than the Caesar Superdome. And before the Caesar Superdome in Louisiana was called Mercedes-Benz Arena, and before Mercedes-Benz it was used to be known as the Louisiana Dome. So it changed name just like I changed name several times, and of course that is what it has to be known today as the Caesar Superdome. And it's changed name, but it's kind of remained the same structure, although there was some modifications and renovations. And just like I changed my name, although officially still have to pay for changing of my name, but that's what we have to be doing on once we have those monetary money to get to the process for me to change officially my name. So to build on the Canadian-US border this massive, greatest ever Coliseum ever built, mass sports arena, to be 11 times bigger than the Caesar Superdome, and of course to have multi-complex, a multi-sports complex, a big Coliseum to be 11 times bigger than that arena in Louisiana that I've mentioned, where my 49ers lost in Super Bowl 47, which has several nicknames such as Hardball Ball, aka Blackout Ball, aka Burrow Bowl, aka of course several nicknames. Super Bowl 47, one of my favorites, and where me and Donald Trump were gonna fight on a boxing match and inaugurate this coming of our coming Imperial fusion thereof. And afterwards we're gonna have events 24/7 for the firefighters, for the security forces, for the butchers, the bakers, the welders, the plumbers, for all. Each week is gonna be dedicated to a different industry, to a different workers, whether the nurses, the cleaning workers, the daycare workers changing some diapers in the daycares, the fast food workers, the grocery store clerks, all the trades are gonna be celebrated in that mass coliseum. And of course we're gonna have sports in perpetuities, we're gonna have sports in perpetuity, and we're gonna have of course all the events 24/7 with dancing and boxing and fitness and gridiron and basketball, and of course it could be even a little bit of mixed martial arts in there and fused. And we're gonna have high schools and universities attending every week, every Sabbath, on the weekend and during the weekdays, and it's gonna be sports 24/7 and a mass public-private partnership, where of course via the YouTube channel live with the internet connection, and of course the military and security forces to have workouts, training, exercise, and everybody can tune in 24/7. And I'm gonna be there, and of course I'm always gonna be working out, training, exercising 24/7 in that complex. And that is just something which we're gonna have to be doing together in the interior matters of the building of this mega complex, both of Canadian and aluminum Canadian and United States aluminum and steel is going to be joined on the Canadian-US border to signalize the beginning of our fusion, this massive Colosseum, which we're going to have, of course, together, which we're going to build. Parallel to this massive Colosseum, let's build the Forgotten Goddess Temple, and the Goddess, it's God bless our coming empire, Goddess kiss, because I got those trillions of kisses collected from the Forgotten Goddess. And of course, the Forgotten Goddess is something which we have to be building. Goddess, she doesn't need my temples. I'm a piece of dust, nobody, but she's got the pyramids. So the Forgotten Goddess, GODDSS temple to build, she already has those pyramids there for thousands of years. They stood. Sun still shines, still rises every second, of course, but that's what we have to build. And the third one, or in whatever order, the Rainbow People's Palace for the fellow neurodivergent community, and proud to that. The fourth one, the House of the Dragon. The House of the Dragon, the Pyramid Scarlet. Scarlet and Crimson and Scarlet are, of course, shades of that red. And pledge your legions to our family. Let's build the four. And in this massive Coliseum, the biggest ever sports arena built ever in the world, the history of the world, we're going to build it. Join Canada, United States together on the Canadian-US border. And me and Donald Trump are going to fight as the inauguration event for that starting of the building or the construction thereof. And that's when we're going to start building it, that massive Coliseum with the inauguration event, me fighting Donald Trump. And Granddaddy Trump might knock me down. He's a toughie. He's tough. Granddaddy Trump is tough. I do not fully support many of these policies. I believe certain amnesty should be given, of course, to documents, and that's why my DRT theory best, and according certain amnesty to those who have lived in our coming empire. But by fusing Canada and United States, we're going to do a mass census with this fusion, and we're going to do a mass census and a mass census of all the citizens and all living in the 63 with a corporation of all our forces. And we're going to build new servers and compute where we're going to, of course, implement this mass census ASAP. DRT, debt fusion theory, and by the DRT we will be able to do it. The DRT theory, my debt fusion theory, is the solution, the only solution, or something similar. Why do I make that statement? Due to, of course, the fact that we have four main problems, economic problems, which are now pressing. One of the main problems economically for both Canada and United States, and my DRT theory has to be implemented binationally, because of course it is part of the bipolar strategy for the North American civilizational complex, imperial republican emergence and reestablishment thereof, for total BDD, benevolent dominance and dominion. The DRT, debt fusion theory, of course, integrates monetary integration theory, and monetary integration theory is the financial theory which was established, incorporated in the European Union in the 90s. So keep in mind that the DRT, debt fusion theory, has integrally in it, inside the debt fusion theory, the DRT, is included the MIT, monetary integration theory, and that's the financial theory which was implemented in the European Union by the European Union. Of course, the destruction, of course, of their all respective national banks. The Germans, the Italians, the French, of course, they destroyed their national central banks, and they created a mass European central bank to be, of course, the mass bank for the common European Union back in the 90s. So my DRT theory includes that monetary integration theory, which of course done, and of course which have been implemented thereof to be on the go. So that is something which we have to establish thereof to get the DRT, because of the growing economic pressures. Four main problems are pressing the vast majority of the population of both Canada and United States. One of the pressing matters is the growing cost of rents. Rents are going up. My rent went up also, but I cannot complain because I believe that it is justified. I'm not going to say the amount, but it went up between $6 and $10. So I cannot really complain for my position, because I think between 6 and 10 it's even lower than what the maximum is allowed by regulations and rules. So I cannot complain. But when I hear that rents go up 25%, 30, 44%, more than 45, 50%, that's unacceptable, of course. But also, prior to the rents, the stagnation of the salaries and the growing prices, the growing cost of living, everything is increasing. Not everything exactly, but most of the things which we buy, of course, the eggs, the butter, the milk, the chocolate bars, of course, I used to buy at $1 3.5 years ago. They went up from $1 to $1.17, then from $1.17 to $1.49, and finally I saw last week when I went, they were $1.98. $1.98. $1.98. That was $1.98. That was a lot. that was double, and that of course is something which we have to appellate and we have to conjugate in our North American civilizational complex of where we are and where we idealize, of course, to all the things which we have integrally in the minds, of course, of our fellow citizens. And the vast majority are struggling from the growing cost of living, the rental increase, the stagnation of the salary makes it that it's unsustainable for the prices to keep on going up, and every day, every week, they keep on going up. And the fourth one, in whatever order, depends for who, individual sovereign citizens, but in whatever order you put them, of course, that is something which we have to be allotted and have to go on the position where we are to get on those levels of finding solutions. So these four economic problems can be in the variation of the order. The order can be interchanged depending on the dynamic of the individual citizen, XYZ factors. But those are the four problems, economic, for the vast majority. So keep that in mind, that now we discuss the solution, the debt refusion theory. So the DRT includes monetary integration theory. So those are mentioned four problems, but I didn't mention the fourth one. I will now, or it could be the first for some. It's growing credit card debt. We reach Canadians in the United States. We have a record-breaking credit card debt. Of course, the credit card debt is a record-breaking now, and that is, of course, what is financially very tough to manage. The growing credit card debts. People are maxed out. Most of Canadians, and my brothers and sisters in the USA, have a growing credit card debt. Even now, somebody swiping the credit card and is on the fourth credit card or going on the fifth and is maxed out and is buying in from Montreal to San Francisco, making some purchases, of course, which can be even more detrimental, but they might be purchases which they have to make because they have maybe to get some food and they weren't accessible to the food bank, because we see record-breaking food bank use in both Canada and United States in the past 3.5 years. So it's problematic. The DRT is the solution. I'm going to explain the DRT as simply as I can without utilizing too much academic intellectual words and phrases thereof. So we're going to take all the public and the private debt, including my $10,000, which I don't have credit cards myself. I have a credit line of $10,000, so I can say I'm $10,000 in debt and have been paying it. Then I have to use it again for food, and it's $10,000 for the past years. That's what I have as debt. 10,000. That's it for me. 10,000. So we're going to take all the public-private debt of Canada, coast to coast, ocean to ocean. We're going to take it, add it all up, convert it into US dollars. We're gonna convert it into US dollars. We're gonna add it together with the United States public-private debt. Keep in mind, my DRT theory, we're gonna implement it both Canada and United States, just like they did in the European Union. All that money and the money in circulation plus the public-private debt will be the initial money supply for this new money in circulation. We're gonna create a joint Canadian-United States central bank, the Imperial Republic Central Bank. And other countries can join us thereafter, but first Canada, United States, and then the North and the South together. This new central bank. We're going to create a new currency, which will have the value of the US dollar. We're going to call it the UE. U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot UE. The U, the U, the U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot UE. The UE. U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot UE. The universal exchange, and of course, we're going to have to work together with my brother citizen Bill Gates of Blackstone and BlackRock, are two financial institutions which are private. So, in other words, it takes both private and public banking and financial and commercial institutions, the Bank of Canada and the Federal Reserve, along with Vanguard and BlackRock and Blackstone. They merged after 1989 because they were one before in the 80s, but they split, so that it requires a mass public-private partnership to implement the DRT. So we're going to create the UE, U dot universal, E dot exchange, U dot unit. The UE. The universal exchange is going to have the value of the US dollar. We're going to set an interest rate level of 10% thereafter. 10% is not going to be able to be more than 10%. It could be lower than 10%. It could be 7%. It could be 3%. It could be 4%. It could be 5%. It could be 1.56%, 3.33%, 4.18%, 1.56%, 6.1, 9.3, below 10%. So below 10%, that is what is going to be with that, and that's what we're going to get on that drill, of course, to get it on that rock and roll side of things. And that's the universal exchange unit, and that's how we have to get doing on that drill for the 11. And with this money, with the implementation of the DRT, we're going to be able to do lots of goods for the public and the private. We're going to rebuild the North American infrastructure, mass investment. So by implementing the DRT, we're going to put millions of people to work. We're going to mass rebuild the infrastructure. I guess we can oversee it as the Dragonomic together. We're going to build those 44 tunnels across the North American Collective in case of a thermonuclear war for the youth, for the future of the youth. So we're going to fuse the perpetual imperial Republican Union. We're going to build together. We're going to build the bridges, the aqueducts. Of course, we're going to mass finance fitness, citizens to work out, train, exercise. We're going to work out, train, exercise. We're going to mass finance citizens to work out, train, exercise. We're going to create places, and we're going to build new servers, new computers in a public-private partnership-based manner where people can monitor, because we have to establish webcams from coast to coast, ocean to ocean, across the 10 provinces, 50 states and 3 territories, which we're going to merge, and where people can go and they can work out, train, exercise, and we're going to have mass public monitorizations, where the citizens can go and monitor the activities, especially lots of working out, training, exercising in the public, and see and have to know everything that's coming in from the airports and the ports, from the airports and the ports, from the coast to coast, ocean to ocean for the 63, because we're going to fuse in the Imperial Federal Police Force. We're going to create, parallel to the Dragon Army, the Imperial Police Force, which is going to be a merging of the FBI and the RCMP. We're going to merge the RCMP of the FBI together and our security forces as we're going to fuse, and that's going to be to serve only for security, service, and defense. And we're going to have security and parallel to reestablishing the reestablishment, parallel to reestablishing the and revitalizing the public sphere, the bridges, the roads, the potholes, and mass infrastructure building. We're going to build those 44. We're going to building more hydroelectric dams. We're going to mass finance citizens to work out, train, exercise, and parallel to mass fitness exercising. We're going to, of course, credit people, citizens, UE, Universal Exchange Unit, the UEs, of course, in order, of course, for them to do training, exercising, or whatever the case may be. The Universal Exchange Unit, we're going to, of course, create it, and, of course, appellate it, of course, to do on the side of the things which we have to get that rock and roll, to build, of course, these 44 tunnels, and conclusively we have to rock and roll to also build more hydroelectric dams, and of course to get the Golden Dome, which we're going to build a hawk in it, put the Canada to get a hawk in it, and finance mass tourism as well. That's why we have to open up, and via the Dragon Army Public-Private Partnership Initiative, to open up, of course, all the highways and the trains to mass finance, and of course the hotels and motels across the 63, the 10 provinces, 50 states, 3 territories, to mass finance tourism. People from the United States, as we're going to fuse from the 50 and the 10 and the 3, to see the United States, for my brothers and sisters in the United States, to see Canada, especially Banff, and especially as the Grand Canyon. But there's so much special things across the 50 states across North America, which we haven't seen even the North, which we're going to mass finance tourism. And by mass financing tourism, that's going to allow us, of course, to implement further the consequential implementation and wellness. By financing tourism, we're going to establish a mass imperial esprit de corps, and we're going to establish wellness. Mass imperial wellness, regeneration for the empire. Pledge allegiance, legions. Dar family. We're gonna rock and roll in French because we're in La Belle Province a little bit right now. So that's just the introduction, I guess, to what's the storm of the century, geopolitics. Bienvenue Québécois et Québécoises. Je viens de faire un discours de la géopolitique. Je dois commencer bien sûr avec ma gratitude, la gratitude que j'ai payé mon loyer, j'ai payé ma facture d'électricité. On est le 2 août 2025. Je suis de bonne humeur, joyeux, jovial, mais stressé financièrement. Puis bien sûr, de manière que je suis un stress financier, je m'inquiète un peu. J'ai eu des frissons hier quand j'ai lu sur le site du White House, de la Maison-Blanche des États-Unis, qui ont fait leur communication officielle et leur justification de l'augmentation des tarifs vis-à-vis le Canada. C'est alarmant. J'ai jamais entendu ça. Puis du 21e siècle, je pense que c'est des paroles qui n'ont jamais existé auparavant. Ces paroles, bien sûr, n'ont jamais existé auparavant dans la conséquence envers le Canada puis avec les États-Unis pour en faire, bien sûr, d'une manière que ça soit décrit de la manière que je peux le décrire à moi-même dans ce point de circonstance où que je me retrouve aujourd'hui en faisant, bien sûr, une évaluation, bien sûr, car je suis un analyste, théoricien et stratège penseur de la géopolitique, j'ai l'Asperger, donc je suis moins capable dans les interactions sociales et dans les choses de même, mais quand ça vient aux intérêts spéciaux, aussi connus comme intérêts obsessifs chez ma communauté d'Asperger, qu'on constitue une petite minorité de 0,44%, je dois toujours bâtir des ponts, des petits ponts moyens, larges ou extra larges avec vous, les neurotypiques que vous-même vous constituez les 99,56% des gens. C'est sûr que des fois, il va y avoir une manière de ma communication qui va être un peu peut-être plus étrange, plus sinon aperçue, mais il va falloir juste faire un petit effort puis se baser juste sur comme moi je dois faire un effort puis on doit bâtir ses pas parce que c'est sûr qu'on n'a pas de relation antagoniste, on n'a pas de relation vis-à-vis d'antagonisme ou que ce soit quelque chose de dans le point de vue d'antagonisme. Et donc, veux pas, on doit bâtir ses ponts. Donc, j'ai payé mon loyer pour le mois de août. J'ai payé ma facture d'électricité, puis j'ai payé mon cellulaire. Donc, ça va bien. En payant ces 3 factures, je peux dire que je vais continuer à faire du travail puis mes démarches. Moi, j'ai pas besoin de beaucoup de soutien en tant que Asperger, mon soutien est minimal, puis c'est juste bien sûr qu'à cause de ces intérêts spéciaux que depuis des années, puis des années, j'ai une routine spéciale, bien sûr, qui se tourne comme routine, puis j'ai une certaine routine vis-à-vis, tu sais, les aspects, nous on a une routine rituelle qui se tourne, puis on s'engage avec intensité, super concentration directement dans les intérêts spéciaux qui nous préoccupent pas mal tout le temps au quotidien. Puis des fois, ça fait interférence ou ça peut nuire au développement des autres caractéristiques telles la socialisation ou d'autres choses de la maison ou d'autres choses qui se passent. Puis les 3 problèmes qui nous pressent le plus, qui nous touchent le plus, bien sûr, c'est les sans-emploi. 80% des Aspergers n'ont pas d'emploi. Là, 80%, c'est 4 sur 5. Donc, il faut tenir ça en compte toujours quand on se discute. Puis moi-même, j'ai eu bien de l'emploi que j'ai bien aimé durant la COVID. Je travaille avec les vieux, les aînés, puis bien sûr avec dans l'acier, dans la sellerie. J'aime le travail, puis je suis quelqu'un de physique, c'est juste que je suis différent, puis j'ai commencé à accepter ça il y a 3 ans et demi. Ça faisait des années puis des années qu'on me l'avait dit, puis on me l'avait diagnostiqué, puis on m'avait dit, tu sais que tu as l'Asperger, tu as l'autisme hautement fonctionnel parce que c'est la même chose, l'Asperger et l'autisme hautement fonctionnel. C'est toujours quelque chose qui a été dur à accepter moi-même jusqu'à dernièrement, puis je dois remercier mon ami Anonyme pour un livre qui m'a été prêté, que ça peut être en anglais, c'est le titre en anglais, c'est Appreciating Asperger Syndrome. Pour le traduire, c'est apprécier le syndrome de l'Asperger. Et c'est quelque chose qui moi-même j'ai appris beaucoup vis-à-vis à comment je suis, puis je perçois les gens, le monde, puis c'est certaines choses que donc moi-même je peux être vulnérable. J'ai des vulnérabilités vis-à-vis les interactions sociales, vis-à-vis les autres à cause de ces différences que des fois on peut dire les choses directement, puis on peut offenser, puis on peut bien sûr offenser ou dire 2-3 fois la même chose, s'approcher trop proche dans la conversation, soit briser l'espace personnel. C'est des choses que je dois comprendre de la manière que je vis en tant que neurodivergent, puis pas justement neurodivergent, mais en tant que personne de la communauté LGBTQ, car je suis androgyne, pansexuel. Monsieur, madame, je me considère androgyne, mais ça veut dire monsieur, madame, vu que je dis souvent la cause, c'est mes réincarnations. Des fois, j'ai été né homme, femme, prêtresse de l'ancienne Égypte, ancien Rome. Des fois, j'ai été né femme ici, québécoise. J'ai vécu entre 1688 et 1735. Et puis, des fois, j'ai été né homme, femme aux États-Unis. J'ai été né 3 fois après 1776. Une fois femme, 2 fois homme. J'ai servi dans l'armée des États-Unis dans des vies antérieures. Si la réincarnation vous intéresse, je vous fais un petit appel pour regarder, bien sûr, lire plutôt un poème du général George Patton, qui a écrit un poème vis-à-vis ses croyances à la réincarnation. Fait que lui-même, il croyait, il y avait les croyances reliées à la réincarnation vis-à-vis des choses qui se sont passées dans son passé quand il avait vécu dans l'ancien Rome, Carthage, Babylone, Sumérie et d'autres pays, d'autres civilisations. Donc, en étant le 2 août 2025, c'est votre neurodivergent, monsieur, madame, avec qui aime le rock'n'roll, qui vous compose des chansons du rock'n'roll au quotidien, qui adore le sport, l'entraînement physique, la danse, et qui est un analyste, penseur et théoricien dans géopolitique indépendant, qui n'est pas parfait. Je vis avec mes cicatrices. Je dois te dire que j'ai déménagé ici, où que je suis maintenant. Je pensais que c'était en 2016. Il paraît que c'était en juillet 2015, fait que ça fait 10 ans. Puis avant ça, j'habitais en Côte-des-Neiges, dans une petite place. Il y avait comme... C'était une comme une cellule de prison, là. Je dis toujours, si j'ai servi mon temps, c'était comme une petite place, là. Il y avait beaucoup de moisissures, puis c'était le sous-sol. Vraiment petite place, un sous-sol, puis il y avait beaucoup de moisissures, mais j'ai de la misère à me souvenir de ma vie avant le printemps 2014. Printemps 2014, comme ma vie avant ça, ça reste un mystère. Mais c'est pas vraiment important. L'important, c'est quand j'ai sorti de ma dépression, puis j'étais suicidaire ici, 2, 3, un couple d'années, puis j'ai traversé le Canada en 2017, puis cet événement, ça m'a fait, comme j'ai eu un gros réveil, je me suis réveillé, j'ai établi un esprit de corps solide avec le Québec, le Canada, les États-Unis, puis ça m'a fait vraiment apprécier tout ce qu'on a ici dans l'Amérique du Nord, incluant les États-Unis. Puis quand je suis arrivé à Banff, en voyant les montagnes, j'ai eu comme wow, puis en traversant le Canada, de côte à côte, en 2017, l'été 2017, en août, on est parti, je pense, le 15 août 2017 avec mon ami anonyme, fait que ça va faire 8 ans, wow, 8 ans déjà. Puis cet événement, ça a complètement changé ma vie depuis que je me suis entraîné. J'ai perdu entre 80 et 93 livres. Entre 80 et 80, j'ai perdu beaucoup de poids. Puis j'étais en dépression suicidaire. C'est quelque chose qui touche beaucoup les gens. L'Asperger's, ça nous touche beaucoup. Hein, 9 fois plus que la population générale. C'est 9 fois plus. Puis le taux de sans-emploi à 80%, c'est 11 fois plus. Et on n'a pas beaucoup d'amis, fait que ces trois choses-là, ça touche bien ma communauté, qui est une petite communauté de 0,44%. On n'est pas beaucoup dans le monde, puis il y en a bien qui ne savent même pas. S'il vous plaît, arrêtez de dire que c'est une maladie. Je ne suis pas une maladie. J'ai une condition de neurodivergence. Mon cerveau est différent à cause de ces petites mutations au niveau microscopique, là, on voit le monde différemment. Fait que des fois, on dit des choses plus directes. C'est pas par on veut causer souffrance ou qu'on veut faire du mal à certaines choses, mais c'est juste que nous, on voit le monde différemment. Fait que, en voyant le monde différemment, c'est sûr que on a de la misère dans certaines choses. Fait qu'il faut toujours que je travaille sur ces caractéristiques, en bâtissant, construisant des petits ponts, des moyens ponts, des ponts larges ou des ponts extra larges avec vous, les neurotypiques. C'est sûr qu'il faut qu'on s'engage des deux côtés parce qu'on vit ensemble. Et encore une fois, il n'y a pas de relation antagoniste. Moi, j'ai pas d'antagonisme envers vous, les 99. Les 99,56%, j'ai pas d'antagonisme envers vous. Les 99,56%, j'ai pas d'antagonisme. Vous comprenez, j'ai pas de relation antagoniste, que ce soit d'une manière que je suis antagoniste envers vous, les 99,56%, vous comprenez? C'est juste qu'il faut bâtir ces ponts-là. Puis là, je ne vais pas discuter de l'Asperger, je vais me concentrer sur la géopolitique, car c'est ça mon intérêt spécial, aussi connu comme intérêt obsessif. Et bien sûr, c'est qu'est-ce que je suis moi-même en tant que, pas juste artiste, philosophe, mais bien sûr, un penseur, un analyste, un théoricien, un stratège de la géopolitique. Puis avant que je commence, je dis, puis je fais une déclaration que j'ai prévu qu'est-ce qui se passe maintenant en 2019, en octobre-novembre. J'ai la preuve en plus. En 2019, en octobre-novembre, j'ai prévu qu'il y aura une conflagration internationale dans le monde. J'avais prévu la situation qui se passe maintenant là, dans le monde en 2019 en octobre, parce que c'est ça que je fais au quotidien. Des fois, je passe des heures, puis c'est des années de travail indépendant dans la géopolitique, dans le développement de la stratégie, puis la théorie pour le collectif de l'Amérique du Nord, le Québec, le Canada puis le Québec. On fait partie de ce que j'appelle le collectif de civilisation de l'Amérique du Nord. On est un collectif émergent, nouveau, parce qu'il y a d'autres civilisations, c'est des civilisations millénaires, mais nous, on est un collectif émergent, nouveau, puis on n'est pas tout à fait divorcé de l'Occident, mais on a des distinctions, des caractéristiques de distinction avec l'Occident quand même. Puis ici au Québec, on a fait ce que j'appelle le grand compromis du français pour en continuer à s'avancer, puis avoir une harmonie, puis une paix le plus qu'on peut. Là. C'est sûr que des fois, on se donne des coudes, puis on dit, ben, faites un effort de parler en français, ou faites-vous un effort, mais si vous faites un effort, mais moi j'apprécie ça, si vous faites un effort dans ce point de vue-là, mais c'est juste des fois faire de l'effort, là, ça compte aussi. Comme si moi je le fais pas, un effort, juste me le dire, ben, si vous m'aimez pas la face, c'est correct. Vous m'aimez pas, gardez-vous à distance, il n'y a pas de problème. Juste, vous n'aimez pas faire du mal ou quelque chose que ce soit. J'aime pas la violence, mais je suis hyper vigilant à cause de mon propre traume que j'ai vécu. Je me suis fait attaquer par surprise, une attaque vicieuse. Là. Je me suis fait tout ensanglé, j'étais tout ensanglé. Là, puis j'avais le bras droit disloqué, puis je suis tombé, je connais ma tête sur le ciment, j'étais allé à l'hôpital général juif. Faudrait que j'aille à l'hôpital général juif pour retrouver les archives, voir c'était quand exactement cet événement-là, parce que comme je vous ai dit, ma mémoire, j'ai de la misère à accéder à ma mémoire avant le printemps 2014, ça fait longtemps quand même, 11 ans. Là. Fait que aujourd'hui, l'importance, c'est qu'il faut trouver des solutions du point de vue de où on est rendu avec la situation globale puis du monde, de la situation d'envergence pour qu'on soit aujourd'hui, pour avancer, parce que on voit que déjà il y a des pertes d'emploi vis-à-vis des tarifs que Donald Trump nous a imposés. Puis hier soir, j'ai eu des frissons, là, car je suis un stratège en géopolitique, mais j'ai prévu la situation globale actuelle, mais j'ai pas vraiment prévu qu'il y aura une détérioration, pour dire, j'ai pas vraiment prévu une détérioration des relations avec les États-Unis par contre. Ça, c'est quelque chose de nouveau que moi-même, il faut que je m'adapte, parce que j'avais prévu une troisième guerre mondiale, une conflagration internationale, troisième guerre mondiale, mais j'ai pas prévu, c'est ça que j'avais pas prévu, là, d'un point de la géopolitique, que nos relations avec les États-Unis se détériorent, ils vont se détériorer. Ça, non, ça c'est nouveau. Fait que moi aussi, il faut que j'adapte pour ça mes stratégies, la TRD, il faut qu'on discute. Puis depuis 2018, je fais appel à Donald Trump pour me combattre dans un combat de boxe à cause, bien sûr, que il a fait l'erreur, je dis toujours grand-père, nos frères et sœurs aux États-Unis, parce que je ne veux pas, c'est nos frères et sœurs d'une grosse famille de l'Amérique du Nord, les Québécois nous incluant, puis tous ceux qui viennent nous rejoindre le plus possible, évidemment. Il faut qu'on soit d'une réalité visible de la géopolitique réelle, que nous, il faut qu'on aille les meilleurs, nous, là, en tant que Québécois, Canadiens, puis c'est réciproque pour les États-Unis, il faut qu'on vise, en première importance, c'est d'avoir, quand ça vient de la politique externe, je ne m'adresse pas à la politique domestique à l'intérieur du Canada. Je m'adresse à la politique externe. Il faut qu'on aille les mêmes, il faut qu'on y aille les mêmes, il faut qu'on soit sur la même longueur d'onde, de la droite, de la gauche, du centre-droite, du centre-gauche. C'est sûr que je ne m'adresse pas à l'extrême droite ni à l'extrême gauche là-dessus. Le centrisme, la droite, la gauche, le centre-droite, le centre-gauche. Nous, là, il faut qu'on ait les meilleures relations. Il faut qu'on se vise en première place d'importance, c'est que nous, Québécois, Canadiens, Québécois, il faut qu'on vise vers qu'on ait les meilleures relations possibles, économiques, financières, de défense, à tous les points d'industrie avec les États-Unis. Et les États-Unis, c'est réciproque envers nous. Comprenez? Il n'y a pas de négociation qui se fait là-dessus. Là. On ne peut pas négocier avec ce principe. C'est constamment la même chose, c'est une constance. Comme le N, c'est pour symbole pi qui représente le diamètre, la relation du diamètre avec la circonférence, c'est toujours le même chiffre, c'est 3,14, 15, 16. Et donc, ça ne change pas. C'est constamment la même chose. Fait que ça a été de même, ça fait plus que 75 ans. Puis c'est comme ça aujourd'hui, puis ça sera comme ça jusqu'à quand on aura peut-être un gouvernement mondial, là, mais pour l'instant, ça va être de même. Puis pour les États-Unis, c'est pareil envers nous. Hein. C'est quand ça vient à la politique externe, en première place d'importance, c'est d'avoir les meilleures relations avec nous, avec les États-Unis, et les États-Unis avec nous, sur tous les points économiques, financiers, commerciaux, socioculturels, sportifs, culturels, de défense, de sécurité militaire, etc., 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 etc. Il n'y a pas de non à ça. Vous ne pouvez pas dire non, c'est constamment la même chose. Vous pouvez-vous juste dire dans le positif, faire une affirmation positive, oui, 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 oui. On ne peut pas négocier, on ne peut pas dire non à ça. On ne peut pas dire peut-être c'est de même. Non, c'est la réelle géopolitique. On parle de la géopolitique réelle à cause de notre réalité géographique. L'Atlantique, c'est à l'est, le Pacifique, c'est à l'ouest. Fait que là, quand on dit oui à ça, là, on peut avancer. L'erreur que Donald Trump, grand-père, a faite de faire une erreur avec nous pour nous inviter, parce qu'il y a quand même un paradoxe qui nous invite à l'union avec les États-Unis, qu'on se fusionne avec les États-Unis. Mais il faut qu'on se fusionne d'une manière canadienne-québécoise, québécoise-canadienne avec les États-Unis pour le futur, puis avec les grands compromis qu'on a fait, bien sûr, pour fonder, bien sûr, qu'est-ce qu'on a dans le fondement dans le futur. C'est quelque chose qu'il faut qu'on se considère tous les enjeux socio-économiques dont on vit aujourd'hui aussi. puis surtout les enjeux économiques, financiers qui sont maintenant, qui nous visent, qui nous touchent en ce moment, pas mal, la majorité des citoyens, surtout du point de vue économique. Fait que moi, j'étais très alarmé et inquiet par la situation qui a été... mais c'est la situation, les paroles qui ont été utilisées par la Maison-Blanche d'écrire pourquoi que Donald Trump et l'administration de Trump républicaine, ils ont décidé d'augmenter les tarifs hier. Et les mots qui m'inquiètent en anglais, c'est unusual and extraordinary threat to America. Et que le Canada soit désigné, là, c'est sérieux, écoutez. Que le Canada soit désigné une menace extraordinaire, et hors commun. Unusual, c'est hors commun. Que le Canada soit une menace extraordinaire, hors commun, ça, moi, je n'ai pas prévu ça en 2019. Ça, c'est nouveau moi-même, il faut que je m'adapte à ça. Vous comprenez? Depuis 2018, quand Donald Trump a fait... Je pensais pas qu'il allait continuer avec les tarifs. En 2018, j'ai pris une notion, mais je pensais que ça allait se résoudre. Puis j'ai pas vraiment prévu qu'il sera réélu, par exemple. J'ai prévu une conflagration internationale, mais j'ai pas vraiment prévu qu'il y aura Donald Trump, il sera réélu. Parce que moi, j'aurais voté Biden ou Kamala, vous comprenez? Mais c'est du point de vue que ça, c'est... Vous comprenez? C'est sérieux, là. Il faut penser à ça. Politique externe, là. La justification. Puis il faut le dire que l'année passée, même s'il n'y a pas tant de fentanyl qui passe au sud de la frontière, l'année passée, le 24 octobre, là, 24 octobre, là, 24 octobre, le 24 octobre, 24 octobre, 24 octobre 2004, 2024, l'année passée, là, un couple de mois, la GRC ont démantelé. Ils ont saisi un super laboratoire, donc ça contenait tellement de fentanyl, des capsules et quoi que ce soit, des fentanyl qui pouvaient là, tuer 2 fois la population du Canada. On est rendu à 44 millions. Fait que 44 fois 2, c'est 88 millions. 2 fois, là, juste dans un super laboratoire, vous imaginez. Puis là, la Maison-Blanche a fait mention de que le fentanyl qui a passé depuis le début de l'année jusqu'à fiscale, il s'est augmenté 3 fois. Qu'est-ce que l'année passée, ça a passé l'année passée, fait qu'il y a une augmentation 3 fois plus. Puis même s'ils disent, ils ont dit même que de plus que l'année fiscale n'est pas finie, ça sera fini en septembre. Comment la durée de temps de l'année fiscale aux États-Unis, ça fonctionne. Donc ça, il faut prendre en considération tout ça, vous comprenez? Une menace extraordinaire. On est désigné une menace, là, le Canada. Et aussi, c'est noté en cause que on n'a pas coopéré. Nos forces de sécurité de police, la GRC, c'est équivalent au Bureau fédéral d'enquête. Hein? La FBI, là, FBI, c'est Bureau fédéral d'enquête aux États-Unis. C'est comme la police fédérale, la GRC. Il n'y a pas eu de coordination, mais coordination, on peut traduire comme coopération. C'est à peu près, ça se touche, c'est la même chose généralement, le principe. Là. Coordination, coopération, mais c'est sa distinction, mais ça m'a donné des frissons. On est désigné depuis hier. Là. Une menace hors commun, extraordinaire. Vous comprenez? C'est sérieux. C'est sérieux, moi. Le bon peuple. Le bon peuple, le bon peuple. C'est sérieux, c'est alarmant. Pour ça, la TRD, puis ma vision pour l'Union impériale perpétuelle, des nouveaux articles de la Confédération qu'on doit signer pour un partenariat public-privé de masse par le fusionnement de nos ressources du Nord et la population de nos frères et sœurs aux États-Unis, puis en continuant à avoir une des 63, parce qu'on va fusionner les 10, les 50 et les 3 pour les 63 super-États de la perpétuelle Union de la République impériale. Puis le Québec, on sera quand même avec le français qu'on continuera à faire l'effort. La TRD, théorie de la refusion de la dette, c'est quelque chose qu'il faut qu'on fasse l'implémentation. La théorie de la refusion de la dette pour la création de l'unité d'échange universelle. Fait qu'on va prendre toute la dette, on va faire une nouvelle banque, on va pour les États-Unis et le Canada, on va mettre en circulation l'unité d'échange universel, UT.échange universel, on va faire un recensement, un passeport commun, on va fusionner la GRC et le Bureau d'enquête fédéral pour la création de le système de police fédérale impériale sur le service de police de la République impériale, fédérale impériale. Pour la sécurité totale, la défense, on va financer les gens à l'entraînement physique, on va financer les gens à l'entraînement physique, on va financer les gens au tourisme, on va financer les gens au tourisme, à l'entraînement physique, on va financer les gens, bien sûr, à faire du tourisme, de l'entraînement physique, on va bâtir, construire les 44 tunnels dans le cas d'une guerre thermonucléaire. On va bâtir, construire les 44 tunnels dans le cas d'une guerre thermonucléaire, on va bâtir ces tunnels à travers le Québec, le Canada, les États-Unis, pour la continuité de la civilisation, pour l'intelligence légion, pour l'Empire républicain démocrate, la fusion des États-Unis avec les... C'est notre destin commun. Comme deux jumeaux jumelles, deux jumeaux jumelles, deux jumeaux jumelles, deux jumeaux jumelles, deux jumelles jumelles.